When Jeff Bezos was asked why he needed another $1 billion, he paused. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because the question itself revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of power. "It's not about the money," he said quietly. "It's about what the money represents." The room fell silent. What does it represent? Control over entire industries, the ability to bend governments to your will, and most crucially, immortality through influence. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities. But what happens when a single individual can create those necessities for billions of people? Tonight, we're stripping away the carefully crafted public personas to examine the raw psychological machinery that drives humanity's wealthiest individuals. This isn't about celebrating or condemning them. It's about understanding the dark psychology that separates those who accumulate billions from those who stop at millions. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment with your favorite psychological topic you'd like us to explore next. Elon Musk once tweeted at 3 a.m., "I will own no house." Within hours, he'd purchased another mansion. This contradiction isn't hypocrisy. It's the manifestation of a psychological phenomenon that most people fundamentally misunderstand. The billionaire mind operates on a level of narcissistic supply that would cripple ordinary individuals. At its core, pathological narcissism creates an insatiable hunger for validation that external achievements can never truly satisfy. When most people achieve financial security, they stop. They buy the house, the car, take vacations, and feel content. But for the narcissistic billionaire, each milestone only reveals the next void to fill. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "The wish to acquire is in truth very natural and common, and men always do so when they can." But he was describing normal ambition. What we're examining transcends natural desire. It becomes a compulsion born from deep psychological wounds. Consider the childhood patterns. Many billionaires report feeling invisible or inadequate during formative years. Warren Buffett's father was absent, emotionally unavailable. Bill Gates described feeling like he had to prove his intelligence constantly. These are not coincidences. They are the foundational cracks that later become chasms demanding to be filled with power and recognition. The narcissistic supply they crave isn't just admiration. It's the ability to control how others perceive reality itself. When Jeff Bezos shapes global commerce, when Musk influences cryptocurrency markets with a single tweet, they're not just making money. They're proving to that wounded child inside that they matter, that they exist, that they cannot be ignored or abandoned again. This psychological structure creates what researchers call acquired situational narcissism, but amplified to cosmic proportions. Every business decision becomes a referendum on their worth as human beings. Every competitor becomes a threat to their fragile sense of self. Every dollar accumulated is another layer of armor against the original wound that never quite heals. The terrifying truth? This psychological damage becomes their competitive advantage. While others are satisfied with enough, they're driven by an internal engine that never stops, never rests, never says this is sufficient. "I think I'm living in the future, and everyone else is living in the past," Musk declared during a television interview, his eyes reflecting absolute conviction. This isn't confidence. It's grandiose delusion crystallized into business strategy. The line between visionary thinking and pathological grandiosity becomes irrelevant when both produce identical results. World-changing companies built on the bones of human relationships. Grandiose narcissism manifests in billionaires as an unshakable belief that normal rules don't apply to them. Not just business rules, fundamental laws of human decency, social contracts, even physics itself. They genuinely believe they're operating on a higher plane of existence, chosen by fate or genetics, or sheer force of will to reshape civilization. This grandiosity serves multiple psychological functions. First, it justifies the ruthless decisions required to accumulate extreme wealth. When you believe you're saving humanity, firing 11,000 employees becomes a noble sacrifice. When you see yourself as a modern-day Edison, Manipulating stock prices becomes innovation. The grandiose narrative transforms sociopathy into heroism. Second, it creates a feedback loop of escalating ambition. Normal achievements feel small, insignificant, unworthy of their special status. Mark Zuckerberg couldn't just create a social network. He had to connect the world. Bezos couldn't just sell books. He had to make Earth the best planet in the solar system. The grandiosity demands increasingly impossible goals, which paradoxically often get achieved through sheer force of will and resources. But here's the psychological trap. Grandiosity requires constant validation from external sources. The moment the world stops confirming their specialness, the entire psychological structure threatens to collapse. This creates a dependency on public perception that can drive increasingly erratic behavior. Watch how billionaires respond to criticism. They don't just defend their decisions, they attack the credibility of anyone who questions their judgment. They surround themselves with yes-men, buy media companies, or retreat into echo chambers where their grandiosity can flourish unchallenged. Machiavelli warned that he who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command. But he never anticipated individuals whose need to command would extend to controlling the fundamental narratives of human progress itself. Sometimes you have to fire people, Tim Cook said matter-of-factly, discussing Apple's layoffs as if he were describing the weather. The clinical detachment in his voice wasn't callousness. It was the inevitable result of a psychological adaptation that makes extreme wealth accumulation possible. Empathy, for the billionaire class, becomes a luxury they systematically eliminate. Research consistently shows that as individuals accumulate wealth and power, their capacity for empathy measurably decreases. But with billionaires, this isn't just correlation, it's conscious cultivation. Empathy interferes with the calculated decisions required to build and maintain vast fortunes. Feel too much for your competitors, and you won't crush them completely. Worry too much about displaced workers, and you'll hesitate to automate entire industries. The psychological mechanism is elegant in its brutality. They reframe human suffering as necessary sacrifice for greater good. When Amazon warehouse workers collapse from exhaustion, it's not exploitation, it's the price of revolutionary logistics. When pharmaceutical companies price insulin beyond reach, it's not greed, it's incentivizing innovation. The empathy deficit becomes a feature, not a bug. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." Billionaires have internalized this principle so completely that they apply it not just to business relationships, but to their fundamental view of humanity itself. This empathy deficit manifests in their philanthropy too. They don't give money because they feel others' pain. They give because it enhances their grandiose self-image and provides tax advantages. Notice how their charitable efforts focus on abstract, future-oriented goals: space exploration, artificial intelligence, life extension. These allow them to play savior without confronting immediate human suffering that might trigger residual empathy. The psychological protection is complete. They've trained themselves to see individual human pain as statistically insignificant compared to their larger mission. This isn't sociopathy in the clinical sense. It's something potentially more dangerous. It's the systematic elimination of the psychological barriers that prevent most humans from inflicting suffering on others. The question becomes, at what point does strategic emotional numbness become indistinguishable from genuine moral blindness? "I don't have friends, I have alliances," Larry Ellison once told a journalist, his smile never reaching his eyes. This wasn't a joke. It was a confession of how billionaire minds fundamentally restructure human relationships. Every interaction becomes transactional, every person a potential asset or liability, every emotion a tool for manipulation. The Machiavellian billionaire operates from a core principle that most people reject instinctively. Human beings are resources to be optimized, not individuals to be respected. This isn't born from cruelty. It's the inevitable evolution of a mind that has learned to see patterns in human behavior the way others see patterns in stock charts. Watch how they build their inner circles. Every assistant, advisor, and family member serves a specific function in their wealth accumulation machine. They surround themselves with people who complement their weaknesses while never threatening their authority. The loyalty they inspire isn't love. It's dependency carefully cultivated through a mixture of financial reward and psychological manipulation. Consider how they handle betrayal. When someone in their orbit steps out of line, the response isn't emotional, it's surgical. Careers end, reputations shatter, entire industries can be reshaped to punish a single act of defiance. This isn't revenge, it's messaging. Every destruction serves as a lesson to others about the cost of disloyalty. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." Billionaires have weaponized this insight, creating systems where people become complicit in their own exploitation. The psychological sophistication is remarkable. They understand that humans crave purpose, belonging, and significance. So they provide it, but always in service of their larger objectives. Employees don't just work jobs, they change the world. Customers don't just buy products, they join revolutions. Everyone gets to feel special while feeding the machine. The most chilling aspect? Many of their human chess pieces genuinely believe they're willing participants rather than manipulated assets. The billionaire's greatest trick isn't accumulating wealth. It's convincing others that serving their accumulation is somehow serving themselves. This systematic dehumanization becomes so complete that they lose the ability to see it as dehumanization at all. When Amazon systematically undercuts competitors at a loss for years, then raises prices once they've achieved market dominance, it's not business strategy. It's economic warfare disguised as capitalism. The Machiavellian billionaire doesn't just participate in markets, they reshape the fundamental rules until competition becomes impossible. The psychology behind this is fascinating. They genuinely believe that eliminating competition serves the greater good. In their minds, market dominance leads to efficiency, innovation, and better consumer outcomes. The fact that it also leads to unprecedented personal wealth is just a happy coincidence. This self-serving rationalization allows them to wage economic war while maintaining their grandiose self-image as beneficial forces. Their methods follow classical Machiavellian principles with modern sophistication. First, they identify market inefficiencies or regulatory gaps. Then, they exploit these openings with such overwhelming force that smaller competitors cannot respond. Finally, they use their accumulated power to ensure the regulatory environment permanently favors their position. Consider how they handle government relationships. They don't just lobby, they create revolving doors between their companies and regulatory agencies. Former employees become policymakers. Former policymakers become board members. The line between corporate interest and public policy dissolves completely. Machiavelli understood that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Modern billionaires have perfected this art, presenting themselves as innovators and job creators, while systematically eliminating the conditions that allowed their own success to be possible. The taxation game reveals their true nature. They structure their wealth to minimize tax obligations while simultaneously depending on public infrastructure for their business models. Roads, internet, educated workforces, legal systems, all funded by taxes they've engineered themselves out of paying. The hypocrisy isn't accidental, it's strategic. They've created a system where privatized gains and socialized losses become the norm. When their companies succeed, they capture the profits. When they fail, taxpayers fund the bailouts. The risk-reward equation has been fundamentally altered in their favor through decades of systematic manipulation. The psychological justification is always the same. They're not gaming the system. They're optimizing it. They're not avoiding responsibility. They're maximizing efficiency. The market isn't rigged. It's evolved to reward superior intelligence and vision. This level of self-deception requires extraordinary mental gymnastics, but the alternative, acknowledging their parasitic relationship with society, would threaten their entire psychological structure. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Thucydides wrote over 2 millennia ago, but he could have been describing the internal philosophy that drives modern billionaire behavior. They've transformed social Darwinism from a discredited theory into a personal religion, complete with moral justifications for any level of exploitation. In their worldview, extreme wealth accumulation isn't just acceptable, it's evidence of evolutionary superiority.
They genuinely believe they represent the next stage of human development, naturally selected for intelligence, vision, and strength. Everyone else exists on a lower tier of the evolutionary hierarchy, deserving of their fate. This psychological framework serves multiple functions. It eliminates guilt about inequality. After all, they're just following natural law. It justifies unlimited accumulation. The strong naturally dominate resources.
Most importantly, it transforms every cruel decision into an act of cosmic justice. When billionaires automate away millions of jobs, they frame it as progress accelerating natural selection. When they manipulate markets to crush competitors, it's simply the strong eliminating the weak. When they use their wealth to influence elections and policy, they're ensuring the most fit individuals guide civilization. Machiavelli wrote that the vulgar crowd follows appearances, but billionaires have elevated themselves above such concerns. They operate by different moral standards because they believe they are fundamentally different creatures. The rules that govern ordinary humans, fairness, reciprocity, social responsibility, simply don't apply to evolutionary superiors. The psychological protection this provides is complete. No amount of criticism can penetrate their certainty because criticism comes from evolutionary inferiors who couldn't possibly understand the burden of superiority. They've created an unfalsifiable belief system that interprets every challenge as validation of their special status. The most disturbing aspect isn't their belief in their own superiority. It's how effectively they've convinced others to accept it. Millions of people who will never achieve even modest wealth defend billionaire privileges, convinced that they too might someday join the evolutionary elite. This isn't just wealth inequality, it's the emergence of a psychological caste system where extreme accumulation becomes not just accepted, but worshipped as evidence of human evolution in action. The psychological architecture we've examined tonight reveals an uncomfortable truth. The traits that create billionaires are not aberrations of human nature. They're human nature stripped of the social constraints that govern the rest of us. The narcissistic foundation, the empathy deficit, the Machiavellian manipulation. These aren't pathologies, they're adaptations to a system that rewards exactly these behaviors. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about power, it was about recognition. He forced us to see that the qualities we publicly condemn are often the same qualities that privately succeed. We live in a world that claims to value cooperation, fairness, and human dignity, while systematically rewarding their opposites with unprecedented wealth and influence. The billionaire mind isn't broken. It's perfectly calibrated to exploit the contradictions in our economic and social systems. They've simply taken the logical endpoint of competitive capitalism and pursued it without the psychological barriers that limit others. They've answered the question, what happens when someone fully embraces the system's actual rules rather than its stated values? The psychology of greed at this level transcends individual pathology and becomes a mirror reflecting our collective choices about what we truly value. Every billion accumulated represents millions of people who accepted that this level of inequality is not just inevitable, but desirable. Understanding their psychology doesn't mean forgiving their impact. It means recognizing that they're not aliens or monsters. They're humans who've systematically eliminated the psychological constraints that prevent most of us from inflicting this level of damage on society. They're what we create when we build systems that reward unlimited accumulation while punishing empathy and cooperation. The real question isn't why they behave this way. It's why we've built a world where behaving this way leads to ultimate success and social admiration. The psychology we've explored tonight exists on a spectrum, and all of us possess these tendencies to varying degrees. The difference is in how far we're willing to go, what constraints we accept, and whether we retain the capacity to see others as fully human. Take a moment to honestly examine your own relationship with power, wealth, and competition. When do you manipulate rather than persuade? When do you view others as obstacles rather than individuals? When do you justify harmful actions through abstract greater goods? The billionaire mindset isn't foreign. It's familiar patterns taken to their logical extreme. Understanding this psychology might be the first step toward building systems that reward our better angels instead of our worst impulses. If this exploration into the dark psychology of extreme wealth resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started on examining the hidden psychological forces that shape our world. Drop a comment below with the psychological topic you'd like us to dissect next. The human mind contains depths we're only beginning to understand, and the most powerful among us often reveal the most about what we're all capable of becoming. Remember, knowledge of these psychological patterns isn't meant to excuse them. It's meant to help us recognize and resist them, both in others and in ourselves.